Well, I want to tell you, Pastor Ben asked if I would be coming this way, and he gave me the opportunity to choose what I would talk about. Now, I go around and everybody wants me to talk about Hamas and Gaza and the war and stuff like that, and I really wanted to go to a Bible passage that's a personal fave. And it's found in Genesis 29, so if it takes you a few minutes there, you might want to flip back in your phone or your tablet or your old school Bible, whatever you want to do, that's fine with me. But here's the thing. I wanted to talk for a few moments about a lesson that I think is critical to our understanding. What am I doing on the planet? And am I significant here? And how do I identify the true meaning and significance of my life? How do I even know what it is? And what I want you to see starts with a simple story. So let me dial back and just give you a story. She looked in the mirror and she sobbed. Her makeup ran down her face. She was a mess. He wasn't coming after all of her preparations and all of her excitement. See, they met Tuesday and they had such a good time together. And she thought that when he invited her to go out Friday night, he was actually interested in her. And then she looked in the mirror and thought, what's wrong with me? Why would I think he cares about me? I mean, I'm no beauty queen. I'm average at best. He said he'd be here at 7 and it's 8:30 and now I know he's not coming and I feel a range of foolish and incredibly deep pain. How did I ever believe that he actually cared about me? I mean, what was I thinking anyway? You know, if psychological journals are correct, literally millions of people look in their mirror daily and they do not see the person who's staring back at them. The person that they see is not a person that has any value. This is going to get there. There you go. It's not a person that has any value. They're looking at them and they see somebody that's too thin or too big. The outer shell is somehow damaged. And here's the problem. From the time we are born and raised, we learn a lesson that is fundamentally false, but almost all of us will say we learned. No one said it. We just learned it. We learned that initially our outward appearance is what attracts or repels people from us. We learned that. Now, sometimes it's helpful because you got through junior high and learned to take a bath. That's good. We really like baths. But the point is that we learn that if somebody is marred on the shell, they're going to suffer. Maybe they've gone through a physical handicap and the owner of the shell suffers terribly because they become marginalized or sometimes ignored. They learn that a lot of people ascribe value to us based solely on things like skin pigments or eye shape or how big your nose is. How dumb is that? But don't we all really learn to do it? The fact is, I've said it many, many times, this is not who I am. This is where I live right now. I'm going to get a new one of these. And by the way, I'm gorgeous in 2.0, just in case you were wondering. But seriously, this is just where I live right now. Now, there are some of you who are sitting here, you're maybe in your 20s, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't like this about me, and I don't like this about me. I teach a lot of college students, so let me break the news to you. You're probably the best version of you you're ever going to be. Gravity happeneth to us all, and there is only so much plastic can do. The fact of the matter is the Bible stands in direct contrast, to what we learned. We all have this default switch that you can tell something, you can judge that book by its cover, but you know you can't. And yet at the same time, our real value is hard to figure out. So the Bible says that when I learn my value based entirely on what God has called me to be, when I rest in my value is because my Creator has breathed life into me and given me a course of life, and it's a gift of His to walk through life with me, I'm going to have the opportunity. Then I know my value. But if I put my value on the things that are on the outside, I'm just going to pack up a world of hurt and walk around in a world of suffering. To help us, God recorded a very special little story. It's tucked away in the first book of the Bible in Genesis 29, and it's the story of Leah, and it's one of my personal favorite stories. So I take you back there. Now, here's the truth in the story. When I find my significance in seeking and following God's path, that's when I find peace. When I work to understand what did he call me to be and to do, and that's where I put my value, and that's where I put my weight, I'll find peace because I'll have what he intends for me. So as we read, I want to look for the significance and fulfillment that I should get from that. But listen, if I seek the affirmation and approval of others for my own value, I'm doing nothing but creating hurt for myself. So I want to take you to a family picture, nice family picture. In my neighborhood, that works really well, but here it's a little bit funny looking. I want to show you from the word that truth, but to do that, I want to look first at the players in the story. So we're going to read a little bit of Genesis 29, then I want to address the players before I actually get to the story. And our story picks up Leah's role in the middle of a story that's already ongoing. So Genesis chapter 29, let's pick it up in verse 1. And the very first player I'd like to introduce to you is a guy by the name of Jacob, and his name means trickster. Okay, let's pick up our reading. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the sons of the east. He looked and he saw a well in the field, and behold, there 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it. For from that well they watered the flocks. Now the stone on the mouth of the well was large. Stop right there. There's only 3 ways to get water in the Middle East. You can dig down to an underground aquifer, and that's a well. You can dig a hole and plaster it, wait for the rains to come and fill it up, and then cap it off. That's a cistern. And sometimes the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is so wonderful, he brings the water right to the surface. That's a river or a spring. And Jeremiah chapter 2 says, you've traded the waters of the springs of God for cisterns. He says, you've traded the grace of God for the work of your hands, but that's broke. It won't work. Now, the only filtration system we have to keep water from growing green things in it that you don't want to drink is to keep it dark. And so there's a well cap that's put there, and there's usually some burly guys that come down, and in the Middle East, so sometimes they're women that look like former East German lifters, and they'll come down and they'll move it off, and then everybody gets their water, and they throw it back up on there, and nobody touches it until they come back again, and they keep it dark. So this is the scene. When all the flocks were gathered there, they would then roll the stone, verse 3, from the mouth of the well and water the sheep and put the stone back in its place on the mouth of the well. Jacob said to them, Achi, it's the word for my brothers, but it's a tender word. It's a word my friends say to me in Jerusalem. Achi, where are you from? And he said, we are from Haran. He said to them, do you know Lavan or Laban, son of Nahor? And they said, we know him well. And he said to them, is it well with him? And they said, it is well. And here is Rachel, his daughter, coming with the sheep. He said, behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered. Water the sheep and go and pasture them. But they said, we cannot until the flocks are gathered. Then they will roll the stone from the mouth of the well. Then we can water the sheep. Someone owns this well, and they don't want to touch it until the owner gets there. That's what they're trying to communicate. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. When Yaakov or Jacob saw Rachel or Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob went up and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative of her father, that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. So when Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, he ran out to meet him and he embraced him and he kissed him and brought him into his tent. And then he related to Laban all these things, and Laban said, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month. Now, can we just stop there for a minute? I love visitors. Don't come for a month. Okay, that's a long time to be in my house eating my food. Man, I raised 3 teenagers. Did you have this experience? I used to look around and I didn't know who the people I was feeding at the table were. Where'd you come from? You're not one of mine. And somehow Dottie's cooking was good and it was better than their mom, so they came to our house. Now here's the thing. Laban said to him, surely you are my bone, my flesh. Stayed a month, and Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what will your wages be? Now, I want you to remember that we're here to look at Jacob, and Jacob's name is Trickster because he was hanging on to Esau's foot when he was born. Not only because of that, but he lived up to this trickery that was in his life. And what's interesting is the Lord promised that although he was second-born as Jacob and Esau was firstborn, that he would get the rights of the firstborn and bump his brother out of top spot. All of that was prophesied. Now, if you remember Isaac and Rebekah, they split up the boys, and Isaac really loved Esau because Esau was a hunter and Isaac liked meat. Now, every man in this room understands liking meat. That didn't get an amen? What is wrong with you guys? Beef, it's what's for dinner, okay? Come on now. But Jake was an HGTV tent decorator that hung out with his mama. I'm getting that from Genesis 25, verses 27 and 28. By the way, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. We need decorators. Tents are pretty drab. But I'm saying they split them up, and each one had an unusual affinity, and Jake was attached to his mama, and Esau was attached to his daddy. Jake followed his mother's lead and tricked their aging father as he lay on his deathbed. That's lovely. And literally tricked him into getting Esau's firstborn status. Firstborn status gives you a double portion of the inheritance. You get the tribal stick, and you're the patriarch of the family when daddy dies. And all of this got taken away from him because, honestly, there's this stew incident. Esau used to do something that some of my kids would do. Did you ever do this? They would run all the way down until the tank was empty. And they were desperate. And then they'll trade anything to get the tank full. Well, Esau came in famished and saw that Jake, who, by the way, was doing a little Betty Crocker cooking at the time, in the tent, was making a lentil soup, okay? It was good. It wasn't worth your firstborn heritage, but Esau traded it away to get a bowl of soup. Not only that, but then as Isaac is laying on the bed, Mama is tricking him along with Jacob to steal away Esau's firstborn status and put it on the wrong son by dressing him up in hairy garb because the guy was blind. I mean, how blind? What kind of shape do you have to be in to not know that this is wool wrapped around the other son? I don't know, but I'm telling you, he was a little obtuse and kind of winking out on it. At any rate, just about the time Esau comes back, he's a good hunter. He's a bow hunter. He walks back in, looks at Jake, finds out what happens, and says, you're a dead man. So Jacob and his mama thought, now would be a good time to, go off and find a wife, maybe in a faraway place. So it's kind of a planned vacation. Now, chapter 28, leading up to 29, is the story of Jacob making a hasty retreat to get out from under the bow shot of Esau. But it's even more than that. Right in the middle of 28, in verses 10 through 19, he gets part way up and he gets tired and he lays down and someone shows up he never thought would come. It ends up being God himself. And there's this interesting little dream that he has of a ladder or steps going up to heaven. See, some of you have had this very thing happen. You were cruising along in your life. You made some good decisions, some bad decisions. And then God said, we interrupt the regularly scheduled broadcast of your life to tell you, I'm here. You're connected to heaven. What's going on here is connected to what's going on there. And you might want to consider that I'm real and that you need to know who I am. And Jacob bows and vows in 28 to 20 to 22 of chapter 28, he vows that he would begin to follow God. Now, that's all leading up to this. So, Jake's a new believer. He's grown up as a trickster. He's got a bag of deceptions in his past, but now he's following God. When I read these verses in chapter 29, this is what I learned. I learned that Jake was new to his commitment to the Lord. He's just begun to trust God when he gets there, and he's pretty smart because he doesn't talk until after they tell him what's going on with the family. Like, you don't want to show up at the well and say, hey, by the way, I belong to that guy, and they just killed that guy because you're probably, going to have a short life. So he asks questions. He's a pretty smart guy. Not only that, Jake begins to play the role of a servant. In verses 7 through 10 of chapter 29, he's actually there watering their flocks before he asks anybody for anything. By the way, when Laban comes, Jake is learning to be honest. He sits down and he starts talking about the family, and he starts, look, that meeting with God had a real impact on who Jacob was, because he wasn't the guy who left the camp running from Esau. He was a different guy because God met him. He was also a hard worker, which is new for Jake. Can I just say his interior decorating wasn't the same thing as being out with the flocks and moving big stones. You don't really move big stones decorating a tent. The guy could make an incredible mobile, but now he has the ability to actually get out and do some hard physical work. So he's got a new start. Can we just stop here for a second and say sometimes what you really need in life is a new start? You just need to realize that you've gone as far as you can on the road that you are. And if God interrupts your life and he's so good to you to make you know that he's there, all of a sudden you go, wait a minute. Maybe there really is a heaven. Maybe there really is something after this. Maybe this didn't all just happen. Sometimes we need to break out of the rut and go through a remake. The guy's on his way to meet his new wife, and God gave him a new life to go with it. If you've ever raised a son, you know what I'm about to say. Did you have the experience where your son was dating some girl, and the parents of the girl look at you and tell you how polite your son is, and you're sure they've got the wrong guy? You're going, I don't really know who that is. Oh, he's so kind. He cleans up the dishes after dinner. He does what? And the truth of the matter is, he just found the young lady he'd like to win over. Can we just park that for a second and just put a pin in it? Ladies, when he's courting you, he's at his best. It does not go up from there without very vigorous training on your part. Let us move on. I'm just adding the little extras for you to help you along the way. Now, in Jake's case, he met the Lord, found his greater family, fell in love. Huge changes are happening. He's being remolded. So I want to move on to the next guy, and this is Laban. He is the used camel salesman in the story. He's Jake's uncle. Now look at verse 15. It says, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Doesn't he sound like a used camel dealer? See, he's Becky's brother. Rebecca lied to her ailing, dying husband on his deathbed. This is the brother. And he has about as much deceptive background as his sister does. And so what I can tell you is Laban will show himself to be altogether untrustworthy. How do I know that? Well, if you went a couple of pages ahead, in Genesis 31, Jacob is going to say before he leaves in Genesis 31, verse 6, you know that I have served your father. He's talking to Rachel and Leah. He said, you know I've served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. However, God did not allow him to hurt me. You see it? Jake's uncle cheated him 10 times on his paycheck. How many of you will work with a place that's cheated you 10 times on your paycheck? Some of you go, man, a job is hard to find. Me. But the truth is that manipulative people do exactly what Laban did. He asked the question, how long should you be here serving me for nothing? What can I do for you? But you have to understand the used camel salesman manipulation course they took on their way. It says, ask a question, but don't listen to the answer, because you're going to take care of your problem, not their problem. That's what manipulative people do. You can't trust a used camel salesman. Write that one down. That's an important reality from the Bible. Now, stop for a moment. Just look at the irony of just this other lesson. Jake's in a new start with God. We established at the middle of chapter 28, he just met God. He's now having a new walk, but now he's walking right into a situation where he's being tricked. Trickster who meets Jesus is now going to be tricked. No, wait a minute. Wasn't he following God? Now that I follow God, aren't my greens supposed to be greener? My blues bluer and Bambi eat in my yard? I mean, come on, that's what the commercial is. But the fact of the matter is, Jacob had to be cheated to learn what it felt like to be the cheater. And often God doesn't give you what you want or what you ask for. He gives you what you need. And what he needed to do was be cheated by a family member in the tent camp, because that's exactly what he did to his brother Esau. God's not going to fix you without taking you through the same pain that teaches the lesson. Oh, let's move on. We got another one. Man, this thing is just really not cooperating today. Here we go. There we go. We got her. All right, staring through the little beady eyes here, we have Rachel, and she is the beautiful young woman. And when you read about her in 29:16, it says Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel or Rachel, means little lamb. Now, it's funny, but you can see the whole story now is about birth order, can't you? He's running away from having stolen birth order and walks right into a family where Leah is first and Rachel is second, and this is what's going to happen. The same thing he just did to Esau is about to be done to him. And what's interesting is it's in the very area that he's been stumbling through. Now, her name means little lamb, but we know something more about her. She's very beautiful. The story reveals that she has a deceptive streak, though. Who knew? You grow up under the child of a used camel salesman, and you might not be honest. News at 11. So Genesis 31:35 says that when they actually hightailed it out of town, she lied to her daddy. She was taking some household items and sitting on them and saying, I don't know where they are. Guess what? They're right under your bum. And the reality is that, can we just not stop here and just say, you can't tell character by appearance. When I was in high school, I honestly believed something. Now, some of you are going to say, what a naive kid, and I really was. I believed the quiet girls were the more holy ones. Let me give you a tip. The quiet ones are just the quiet ones. You don't know what they're thinking, okay? But I really thought, because I was one of those people that believed that the real Christians went Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, because if you went Wednesday night, that meant you were a real believer. Here's the thing. If I would have thought about it, I wasn't, and I went all 3. Now, that never occurred to me, but, we have these things that we believe. So here's what I'm saying. Judging a book by its cover is dumb, but it is the default that we all come into this with. So he looked at Rachel, and she was beautiful of form, and she had beautiful eyes. But sometimes the beauty of form actually hides the marring of character. And guess what? He wasn't seeing it. Oh, let me go one more step. This is the older sister. By the way, I've traveled all over. This is their actual likeness. No, it's not. I'm making it up. But the point is, now we're at Leah. And I want you to just look in verse 17, because Leah is somebody that somebody here may identify with. Leah is the word for weak or weary or worn out. If somebody says, hey, honey, you look that is not a compliment, okay? That's what you're saying to me right now? I'm worn out, please. Thank you for the compliment. So listen to the way she's introduced. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful of form and face. Now, there's a lot of ways to understand this. Many commentators say they look almost alike, but one's brown-eyed and one's blue-eyed. For those of you who are blue-eyed in the room, like me, may I just say you are weak in character according to the biblical face value. Why? Because you got to live in the neighborhood. In Jerusalem, we got brown hair with brown eyes with brown skin, followed by brown hair with brown eyes, brown skin. Look at the pictures of my children growing up in Jerusalem, and you will see an entire row of Israelis, and then my kid. Okay? They don't look, one of these things is not like the other. So if you have blue eyes or lighter complected, you're just not what they're looking for. So I'm not saying she was ugly. I'm saying that when they looked at her, they said, something's wrong with that because it doesn't have those deep penetrating eyes. It could be she wasn't as well-shaped. It could be that she had a facial defect. But here's the thing. It's clear that Jake didn't see. She's actually the honest one of the group. The one who's honest is the one nobody's paying attention to. Why? Because they're looking at the eyes, because after all, that's so important. And here's where we need to acknowledge that even in Jacob's new start, he brought the old Jacob with him. Guys, we read 2 Corinthians 5 and we say, all things are passed away, behold, things become new. And we think Citibank got the memo. When you got saved, if you've been badly spending, Citibank is still showing up with the bill. If you love Jesus Christ now, but you grew up as a horrible parent and raised your children under a horrifying situation in your home, they're still angry at you even though Jesus is not. In other words, sanctification is a process of actually putting on what it is that we are to become. Well, here's what I can tell you. Jacob was very appearance conscious. Since he decided family order wasn't very important, he was willing to go for the second girl instead of the first girl. But you need to understand, he's undergoing a transformation. Here he is as a new believer, and he's in love with the form of a serial liar that's the child of a serial liar. That's going to go well, I'm sure. And here's what I know. He doesn't see the beauty of Leah's character because he can only see her eye color. You go, her eye color? Why does that matter? Well, it matters as much as all the other reasons we put obstacles in people's way and say they're not as beautiful. But let's be honest. In spite of her unmarred testimony, Leah didn't have the shape or didn't have the eyes or didn't have something. You have to understand her world. If Leah got passed over so that Rachel got married first, Leah would never get married because her first man rejected her. In other words, Jake would have rode off into the sunset on their camel with Rachel, and Leah would have been a spinster the rest of her life, condemned for things she had nothing to do, because after all, it's a big sin to have blue eyes. So here's the thing. Maybe she wasn't as physically attractive. I don't know. Character-wise, she was more attractive. But character is not what people pick first. And so those are our players. Now I want to read the second part of this, and that's just the deal between Jacob and Laban. Look at verse 18. Now, Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay with me. Now, Laban never clues him in that, yeah, by the way, this isn't going to really work, and I'm going to have to switch it at the end. He skips that part of the detail. Why didn't he just tell him? Look, you got to marry this one, I'll give you a twofer. I mean, it was legal in that time. Why not just do that? Well, here's the thing. Jake is still carrying a set of values. He may be new in his walk with God, but he still has a set of values that were imprinted on him, and he hasn't had that long to get his new life squared away. Look at verse 20. This is great. Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. Aw. Come on, there was not even a single aw. Then Jacob said to Laban, he didn't say, by the way, Laban, it's about that time. He said, give me my wife. After 7 years, the boy just wants the wife he's been working for. My time is completed that I may go into her. Laban gathered all the men of the place, had a feast. Now in the evening, he took his daughter Leah brought her to him, and Jacob went into her. Laban also gave Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came about in the morning, he rolled over, and it was Leah. And he said to Laban, "What is this that you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me?" But Laban said, "It is not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn. See, used camel salesmen never tell you what's in the fine print. The large print giveth, the small print taketh away." Why didn't you tell me that? Now, I know some of you, you got questions. You got questions. How dark did that tent have to be to slip the wrong girl in the tent? Unfortunately, the Bible tells us what God wanted us to know, not the steamy part that we might want to know that he doesn't tell us. So we're going to spend exactly 0 time on that because he spent 0 time on that. Oh. There's just parts he doesn't share. Now, what I want you to see is verse 27. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also for the service, which you shall serve with me for 7 years. So Jacob did so, completed her week. He gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. Laban also gave Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her maid. So Jacob went in to Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served with Laban for another 7 years. See, when you look through this, you can see their apparent agreement. You can see that it was a romantic thing, so the 7 years was really no big deal. You can see the day of reckoning. You can read about the daughter switch. You can read about the shock in the morning when he's got the wrong bride. I'd be shocked too. You can even hear Laban rationally explaining why he tricked him. You can even hear that in verse 27, he entered another agreement, when another wedding, and then another 7 years to pick up a second wife. Here's what you can't hear. You can't hear a single thing about what Leah was feeling. You can't read how it destroyed her heart to know that she was not wanted. Why? Wrong eye color. Well, that's deep. All we read is she got stuck in a situation, and none of it was because of her behaviors. None of it. Let me ask you. How hurt would you be, ladies, if you realized the only way you could get a husband is your dad tricked somebody? How would you feel if during your honeymoon he was actually counting on another woman for next week? You don't read the bankruptcy of her heart. A lot of times in Scripture we see this story, but the story's not the story. The pain behind the story is the story. And here's the thing. This is the third part of our lesson. This is the main part of our lesson. This is why you came this morning. Because in verse 31 it says, "Now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved. So he opened her womb, but Rachel's he kept closed. She was barren." Verse 32, Leah conceived, bore a son, and named him Reuven. Look, a son. That's what it means. And she said, "Because the Lord has seen my affliction," look at this, "surely now my husband will love me." Do you see it? She's bleeding all over the text going, "Will somebody love me?" And the Lord gave her a child. And then she conceived again and bore a son and said, "Because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me another son." So she named him Shimon. Simeon, it means the Lord has heard. Did that work? She conceived again and bore a son and said, "Now, this time my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore she named him Levi." It means attached, Levi. Did that work? She conceived a 4th time. She bore a son, and she said, "This time I will praise the Lord." Therefore she named him Yehudah, Judah. Then she stopped bearing. Men and women, God saw that Leah wasn't being treated fairly. And we see the first 3 times she's crying out for him to pay attention to her, and he's not paying attention to her. Look, a son. She thought, if I bring him something he really wants, then he'll love me. Look, a second son. If I add more, if I just do a little bit more, then he'll love me. How about a third son? At some point, this man's got to get attached to me. It's not until he figured it out. It's not until he looked around and saw that they weren't going to affirm her, and her husband wasn't going to affirm her, and the children weren't going to make up for the hole in her heart. So she looked in the only other direction she could, because looking out and looking in wasn't working, so she looked up. And then she saw that other people set her aside, but God was there. Who gave her the first, second, third, and fourth child? God did. If you're not clear on this, sex doesn't make babies, God does. That is why when someone will come to me and say, my daughter was raped and this is horrifying, she's now pregnant, I'll say, wait, whoa. There's one blessing in a terrible situation, and you're about to kill the one blessing. Don't be stupid. God makes babies. And the fact of the matter is that the truth is it was a terrible way to decide anybody's value, but she was surrounded with people of flawed values, and they looked at her and saw right past her. Listen to me. Every single teen that is in this room right now that is not part of the beautiful crowd has faced this every single day when they walked into school. What's the solution? Well, you can struggle with worth in a world that won't validate what you're truly worth. For Leah, it took 3 children for her to get the message. When I find my significance in the fact that God put me on the planet and has a plan for my life, when I find my value in the fact that Jesus died in my place and I am of inestimable worth, so says him, because of what he paid for me, when I find my value there, then I can come to peace. But as long as I'm looking for love in all the wrong places, I'm just setting myself up for more hurt. Pastor Chuck Swindoll used to tell a story. I'm almost done. He used to hold up a nice, clean, crisp $20 bill. And he said, how many of you would like this to go? And all the hands went up. Then he crumbled it up. And then he uncrumbled it and said, how many of you would still like this? And all the hands went up. So he took it and crumbled it and dropped it, put it underneath of his foot, and got it all nice and grimy and dirty, and then picked it up and unfoiled it and said, how many of you would like this? And all the hands still went up, and he said, you have learned a valuable lesson. The fact of the matter is it doesn't matter what you've been through. I abused this bill, I crumpled this bill, I stepped on this bill, I made this bill dirty. But none of you wanted it any less because the value did not depend on the condition. The value depended upon what the owner stamped on it. Guys, there's people in the room who've let parents determine what you think about yourself. In this building, I counseled people who were still fighting with people that were in eternity for 10 years. You're not going to win an argument with a dead person. I don't know how to say that more clearly. And if you let them determine your worth, because way back they said, you'll never amount to anything, and you believed it, you need to understand your affirmation doesn't come from another flawed, broken person. There's a beautiful end. God knows exactly what you're worth. There was a master that came and looked at this old violin and saw the violin, picked it up and began to tune it and then play it. Everyone was amazed, and he said, listen to me, I added nothing to the value of this instrument. The value was already there. You just couldn't see it and you couldn't hear it. The world sees your failures. God sees his workmanship in Ephesians 2. The world labels. God names you. The world estimates your value. God declares your value from heaven. The world evaluates you by performance, and God defines you by his word. When you go out this door, here's my point. If I let my failures describe me, I will live in shame. If I let other people describe me, I will live with insecurity. If I let my successes describe me, I'm going to chase after them so I can keep them going so that no one realizes I feel like a poser in my own life. When I let God's word describe me, finally I discover who I really am. God says you're a child of God. That's what John 1 says. God says you're a new creation. God says you're God's masterpiece. God says you're forgiven and redeemed. He says you're chosen and you're cherished. He paid dearly for you because he loves you dearly. Get off the page of judging by the shell. It's a lie, but it's a really pervasive one that most of us learned early in life.